At 11:47 p.m., the night before our 4th anniversary, I was standing in my kitchen trying to fix a cake that had the wrong name written on it, instead of saying, Happy Anniversary. Mara and Adrian, the bakery, had written, Happy Anniversary, Mara and Andrew. Adrian thought it was hilarious. I didn't. Maybe Andrew's my real soulmate, I joked. Adrian kissed my forehead. Then I better make tomorrow count. That sentence made me smile because I was almost certain he was planning to propose. 3 weeks earlier, I had accidentally seen a jewelry appointment on his calendar. Then my sister started asking suspicious questions about engagement rings. Everything pointed to tomorrow being the day. I thought I was about to have the happiest anniversary of my life. Then Adrian went to take a shower. His phone was sitting on the kitchen counter beside me when it buzzed. I glanced down automatically. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Celeste, his ex-girlfriend. The woman Adrian once told me he never wanted to speak to again. The message preview said, She still doesn't know, does she? I froze. A second message appeared. You said the anniversary was your deadline. I knew Adrian's passcode. I hesitated for maybe 3 seconds before opening his phone. I expected flirting. Secret photos. Maybe proof they were seeing each other. Instead, I found something stranger. Celeste. She still doesn't know, does she? Adrian. No, and tomorrow is not the time to tell her. Celeste. You said the anniversary was your deadline. Then another message came through while I was holding the phone. If you propose without telling her first, you're making this worse. My heart started pounding, so I had been right. He was planning to propose, but apparently there was something he needed to tell me first. I scrolled higher. There were several deleted messages. Then I saw my name. Celeste. What happens when Mara finds out? Adrian. I'm handling it. I kept scrolling. Then I saw another name. My mother's. Celeste. Has Evelyn signed anything yet? My hands went cold. What did my mother have to do with Adrian's ex? I scrolled again. Then I found the message that completely changed what I thought I was looking at. Celeste. If the Ellis property falls through, Elliot walks. Adrian. It won't. Mara will agree. My last name was Ellis. My mother owned a valuable piece of property my late father had left her, and Adrian worked in property development. Suddenly, cheating was no longer my biggest concern. I heard the shower turn off. I quickly put the phone back exactly where it had been. Adrian walked into the kitchen a few seconds later, rubbing his hair with a towel. You okay? He asked. Fine. He picked up his phone. I watched his face when he saw Celeste's messages. His smile disappeared for half a second. Then he looked at me. Who keeps messaging you? I asked. He answered immediately. Julian. His brother. It was a lie. That was the moment everything changed. I smiled like I believed him. Later that night, when Adrian was asleep, I quietly photographed the messages with my own phone. The next morning, I called my mother. Mum, has Adrian asked you to sign anything recently? There was a pause. Then she said, Yes. My stomach dropped. What did you sign? Something about the house. I stood up. What about the house? A valuation, I think. Do you have a copy? Another pause. No? Why not? She sounded confused. Adrian took it with him. I closed my eyes. When? A few weeks ago. Then she added something that made my blood run cold. He said he needed it for his investor. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. A message from Adrian. Can't wait for tonight. Wear the green dress. Trust me. Then another message arrived. Unknown number. It contained a photo of Adrian sitting across from Celeste in a cafe. The picture had been taken 3 days earlier. Underneath it was one sentence. Before you say yes tonight, ask him what he promised the investor about your mother's house. I stared at the photograph until my screen went dark. Adrian and Celeste were sitting across from each other in a cafe with a yellow folder between them. 3 days earlier. He had lied directly to my face, but strangely, cheating was becoming the least frightening explanation. I immediately called the unknown number, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Who is this?" No response. Then, what did Adrian promise the investor? Nothing. I called my best friend Priya. Within 20 minutes, we were driving to my mother's house. "Whatever you do," Priya told me, "don't tell Adrian what you know yet." I wasn't planning to. You absolutely were. She knew me too well. When we arrived, Mum pulled out every document she had relating to the property. We searched through everything. Nothing. Then she suddenly remembered something. The solicitor? What solicitor? There was a phone number on Adrian's paperwork. She found it written in an old notebook. I called immediately. After Mum confirmed her identity, the receptionist checked their records. "There was an authorization signed several weeks ago," she said. "What kind?" "An authority allowing preliminary negotiations regarding potential redevelopment." I looked at Mum. Her face went pale. "Mum, Adrian told you this was for evaluation." "Yes." The receptionist quickly added that the document did not transfer ownership or allow anyone to sell the property. That was a relief, but something still wasn't right. "What negotiations?" Mum asked. I never agreed to negotiations. Before I could respond, my phone rang. "Adrian," I answered. "Hey, where are you?" "At Mum's." There was a brief silence. "What are you doing there?" "Visiting." Another pause. Then Adrian asked, "Did she find the paperwork?" My stomach tightened. I hadn't told him we were searching for it. "What paperwork?" "Mara." His voice changed. "What's going on?" I looked at Priya. She shook her head. "Don't tell him. I should have listened." Instead, I asked, "What did you promise Elliot?" Silence. Then Adrian said quietly, "Who told you about Elliot?" I immediately knew I'd made a mistake. Answer the question. Did you go through my phone? Did you lie to an investor about my mother's property? Those are two completely different questions. Then answer mine. He sighed. Nothing has happened to Evelyn's house. Nothing can happen without her approval. Why is Celeste involved? Another silence. Then, she's the one who introduced me to Elliot. That caught me off guard. Why are you working with your ex? Because she works in finance. You told me you hadn't spoken to her in years. I hadn't. Things changed. You met her 3 days ago. His voice became sharper. How do you know that? I didn't answer. Now he knew someone else was talking to me. Great. Adrian eventually promised to send me the documents. 10 minutes later, they arrived. Priya and I read them carefully. Adrian hadn't stolen anything. Mum hadn't sold anything. Technically, the document only allowed preliminary discussions. For a few minutes, I wondered if I had completely overreacted. Then Priya noticed the date. Mara. What? Your mum signed this on May 30th. So? She opened one of my screenshots. Celeste's message was dated May 17th, 13 days earlier. If the Ellis deal falls through, Elliot walks. Adrian had replied, "It won't. Mara will agree." I stared at the two dates. Adrian was already describing my mother's property as a deal before she had signed anything. Then Mum said, "I never told Adrian I wanted to sell." That was when someone knocked on the door. Adrian. He was wearing the suit he'd planned to wear to our anniversary dinner. He walked inside and looked directly at me. "I think we need to talk." For the next 20 minutes, Adrian explained everything. Or at least his version. His company was planning a major redevelopment. My mother's property sat between two parcels they wanted. An investor named Elliot was prepared to finance the project. Adrian insisted he hadn't promised anyone the property. "I was trying to create an opportunity for your family," he said. "Then why didn't you tell us?" "Because your mother would have rejected it before hearing the offer." Mum stared at him. That was my decision to make. Adrian looked ashamed. I know. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Were you going to propose tonight?" His expression changed. Slowly, he reached into his jacket. A small velvet box appeared in his hand. "Yes." My chest hurt. Yesterday, that box would have been everything I wanted. Now I didn't even want him to open it. Cancel dinner. Mara, cancel it. I can't. Why? His answer made everything worse. Everyone's already there. My mother looked at him. Everyone? My parents, Julian, Zoe, our friends. Of course, the proposal was public. Adrian stepped closer. Come with me. Let me explain everything properly. I should have refused. Instead, an hour later, I walked into the restaurant beside him. People cheered. I wanted to disappear. Dinner passed in a blur. Then the lights dimmed. Adrian stood. My heart sank. Mara, he began, these last 4 years. My phone vibrated under the table. Unknown number. He hasn't told you the truth. Another message followed. Ask Julian what Adrian told Elliot before your mother signed anything. I slowly looked across the table. Julian, Adrian's older brother and business partner, was staring directly at me. He wasn't smiling. Everyone else had their phones out. Adrian dropped to one knee. He opened the ring box. Mara Ellis, will you marry me? Everyone went silent. I looked at the diamond, then at Adrian, then at Julian, and instead of saying yes, I asked, what exactly did you tell Elliot about my mother's property? Adrian's smile disappeared. And across the table, Julian quietly put down his glass. Nobody moved. Adrian was still on one knee, holding the ring, while 20 people stared at me like I had suddenly started speaking another language. Mara, he whispered. Not here. You chose here. His face tightened. What did you tell Elliot about my mother's property? Behind me, someone slowly lowered their phone. My sister whispered, What is happening? I looked at Julian. You know, don't you? Adrian stood immediately. Leave Julian out of this. That answered more than he realized. Julian looked uncomfortable. Adrian, don't. The way Adrian said it made the entire table go silent again. I looked at the ring one last time. 24 hours earlier, I would have cried seeing it. Now it looked like another question I couldn't answer. I can't say yes. Adrian stared at me, then I walked out. Priya followed. Unfortunately, several people had recorded everything. By the next morning, one of those videos had made its way online. The caption said, Guy plans romantic anniversary proposal. Girlfriend humiliates him in front of everyone. Perfect. People who knew absolutely nothing about my relationship suddenly had very strong opinions about it. Adrian didn't defend me. That bothered me. He sent only one message. When you're ready to hear the truth, call me. I didn't respond. At 10:16 that morning, another message arrived. This one wasn't anonymous. Celeste Rowan. My stomach dropped. We need to meet. Adrian hasn't told you everything. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from the woman I had spent 4 years believing destroyed Adrian's previous relationship. Celeste looked nothing like the villain I had imagined. She looked exhausted. I wasn't sleeping with Adrian, she said immediately. That's comforting. I'm serious. Then why all the secrecy? Because Elliot is my client. She explained that Adrian's company was struggling financially. Badly. A development project had failed, and they desperately needed new investment. Celeste introduced Adrian to Elliot because she would receive a commission if the redevelopment succeeded. And my mother's property? Celeste looked uncomfortable. Adrian told Elliot he could secure it. Could. She didn't answer. Celeste. He made it sound more certain than that. My stomach tightened. How certain? She looked directly at me. Like your family had basically already agreed. I laughed, not because it was funny. My mother didn't even know there was a deal. I know that now. Now? Celeste looked away. That was when I understood something. You knew. Not everything, but you knew enough. She didn't deny it. I stood. Then you're not helping me. You're protecting yourself. Mara, wait. I grabbed my bag. Then Celeste said, Adrian lied to you about me. I stopped. What? I never cheated on him. I turned around. She continued. Our relationship ended because Adrian used money I loaned him to cover a business loss without telling me. I stared at her. He told me you cheated. I know. How? because he told his family the same thing. Suddenly, a 4-year-old story I had never questioned started falling apart. Celeste opened her bag and removed a folder. Inside were emails between Adrian, Elliot, and several other people. She pointed to one. It was dated almost 2 weeks before my mother signed anything. Adrian had written, "Ellis parcel effectively controlled. Final documentation pending." My heart dropped. Controlled. He had told the investor he controlled my mother's property before she had even agreed to negotiate. "Why are you showing me this?" Celeste's voice became quieter. "Because he did something similar to me." Before I could respond, someone stopped beside our table. Julian. I stared at him. "Are you the one who sent me those anonymous messages?" He sat down. "No." "Then who did?" "I don't know." Celeste looked equally surprised to see him. Julian placed a USB drive on the table. "My brother's company is closer to collapse than either of you realize." I didn't touch it. "What is that?" "Internal meeting records." "Why give them to me?" He hesitated. "Because Adrian crossed a line." I almost laughed. "Which one?" Julian looked at me. "Your mother's property isn't the only thing he lied about." My stomach sank. "What else?" Before he could answer, Celeste's phone rang. She looked at the screen. "Elliot." She answered. "Hello?" We watched her face change. "What do you mean he knows?" Silence. Then she looked directly at me. "When?" Another pause. She ended the call. "What happened?" I asked. Celeste swallowed. "Adrian knows we're meeting." My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from Adrian. It contained a screenshot, a photograph of me sitting at the cafe with Celeste and Julian. Underneath, he had written, "So this is how you want to do this? Fine." Then another message appeared. "But before you trust my brother, ask him how much money he loses if your mother refuses to sell." I slowly looked across the table at Julian. His face told me Adrian hadn't made that part up. And suddenly, I realized I might be sitting at a table with 3 liars. I just didn't know which one was lying to me the most. I stared at Julian. "How much money do you lose?" Celeste immediately looked at him too. Julian sighed. "A lot." "How much?" "Enough." I almost laughed. That's not an answer. If the project collapses, the company probably goes with it. There it was. Julian wasn't helping me because he suddenly developed a conscience. He was trying to save himself too. I pushed the USB drive back toward him. "You can keep this." "Mara, wait. No. Celeste makes money if the project succeeds. You lose money if it fails. Adrian needs my mother's property." I stood. Every person telling me to trust them has something to gain. Julian didn't argue. That scared me more than another excuse would have. Then he said, "You're right." I stopped. I should have stopped Adrian months ago. "Why didn't you?" "Because I thought he was bluffing." "About what?" Julian opened his laptop. He showed me an old presentation Adrian had given investors. One slide displayed a map of the redevelopment area. Several properties were highlighted. Then I saw my mother's. "Ellis parcel. Controlled." I stared at the word. "When was this presentation?" "May 14th. My mother didn't sign Adrian's paperwork until May 30th, 16 days later. So he lied. "Yes." "Why?" Julian rubbed his forehead. "Because Elliot wouldn't invest without that property." Suddenly, everything made sense. Adrian had told the investor he already had control. Then, he needed to make his lie become true. That's why he approached Mum. That's why Celeste kept pressuring him. That's why the anniversary became a deadline. And maybe that's why he needed me engaged. I felt sick. Was he marrying me for the property? Julian immediately shook his head. "No." "How would you know?" "Because the project didn't exist when you two started dating." That somehow hurt worse. Our entire relationship hadn't been fake. Adrian had genuinely loved me. Then somewhere along the way, he had decided deceiving me was acceptable. My phone rang. Mum. I answered immediately. Mara? Her voice was shaking. What happened? A man called, asking whether I've changed my mind about withdrawing from the development. I stood. What? I told him I never agreed to anything. My stomach dropped. What did he say? He apologized and hung up. Julian closed his eyes. Elliot's office. How do you know? Because they're starting to check Adrian's story. Things were collapsing. Fast. I drove straight to Mum's house. When I arrived, she was holding another envelope. This came yesterday. It was from the solicitor's office. Inside was the complete copy of the paperwork Mum had signed. I read every page. Nothing transferred ownership. Nothing allowed Adrian to sell. But one section authorized Cole Developments to communicate her preliminary interest to investors. Mum stared at it. I never said I was interested. I know. Then I noticed something strange. Attached to the paperwork was a handwritten meeting note. Client left at 14:35. Mr. Cole remained until 14:52. Asked whether amendments could be made following execution. Advised new signature would be required. My heart started pounding. Adrian stayed behind after Mum left and asked about changing documents after they were signed. The receptionist had written her name underneath. Natalie Brooks. I called the office. Natalie answered. When I explained who I was, she remembered immediately. Yes, your mother came in with Mr. Cole. Was anyone else there? She hesitated. A woman was waiting near reception. Celeste Rowan? I don't know her name. I sent the photograph. A minute later, Natalie said, Yes, that's her. I closed my eyes. Celeste had lied again. She knew far more than she'd admitted. That evening, I confronted her over the phone. You were at the solicitor's office. Silence. Then, yes, you told me you only discovered what Adrian was doing later. I discovered how far he'd gone later. That's not the same thing. I know. You helped him. Another silence. Finally, yes. My anger disappeared for a moment. I hadn't expected her to admit it. I wanted the commission, she said. I convinced myself Evelyn understood what she was signing. And when did you realize she didn't? The day I heard Adrian tell Elliot the engagement would solve everything. My stomach tightened. What does my engagement have to do with it? Celeste hesitated. Mara, tell me. He thought once you were engaged, you'd convince your mother. I sat completely still. The proposal, the beautiful restaurant, the ring, my family, all of it suddenly felt contaminated. Before I could respond, another call came through. Lucas Grant, my university ex-boyfriend. I hadn't spoken to him properly in years. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Lucas worked for a company that had previously evaluated developments in Mum's area. I answered. Mara? Lucas? Sorry for calling randomly. What happened? I saw that proposal video. I groaned. Please don't. No, that's not why I'm calling. His voice became serious. Someone from Cole Developments contacted my company this morning asking us to remove an old project presentation from our shared records. My heart started beating faster. What presentation? One Adrian sent us months ago. Do you still have it? Yes. What does it say? Lucas was silent for a moment. Then, it says your mother's property was already secured. I closed my eyes. Can you send it? I already did. My email notification appeared. I opened the attachment. There it was, dated months earlier, a map, financial projections, and beside my mother's address, owner committed, documentation in progress. This wasn't Adrian exaggerating something Mum had said. He had written this before he ever asked her. My phone buzzed again. Adrian. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. What? His voice was strangely calm. I heard you've been talking to Lucas. My stomach tightened. How do you know that? That doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Mara, listen carefully. Something about his tone frightened me. You're letting people who don't care about you destroy something we spent 4 years building. You destroyed it. No, I made mistakes. You lied about my mother. I was trying to save my company. That doesn't make it better. I know. For the first time, he sounded tired. almost defeated. Then he said, "But if you keep digging, you're going to hurt more people than me." "Is that a threat?" "No." He paused. "It's a warning." The next morning, I understood what he meant. My sister sent me a screenshot from social media. Adrian had posted a statement. He didn't mention the property. He didn't mention the investor. Instead, he wrote about our breakup, about trust, about betrayal, and then he included screenshots of messages between Lucas and me. Real messages, completely stripped of context. The post made it look like I'd been secretly talking to my ex before rejecting Adrian's proposal. Comments were already appearing. Now we know why she said no. Poor guy dodged a bullet. She was probably cheating. Then my mother called. "Mara, what's going on?" I couldn't answer because another notification had just appeared. Cole Developments had released an official statement. Their redevelopment project was being delayed because a previously committed property owner had unexpectedly withdrawn cooperation. They didn't use my mother's name. They didn't need to. Adrian had taken his lie and turned it into our betrayal. And for the first time since this started, I realized he wasn't just trying to defend himself anymore. He was fighting back. By lunchtime, strangers were calling my mother selfish. People had connected the redevelopment statement to my proposal video. Apparently, I wasn't just the woman who publicly rejected her boyfriend. Now, my family was supposedly responsible for destroying a multi-million-dollar development. Adrian called me that afternoon. I answered, "What do you want?" "To fix this. You created this. I can make the statement disappear." I laughed. "How?" "Get Evelyn to agree to negotiations." There it was. Finally. No romantic speeches, no excuses. He wanted the property. "If Mum agrees, you'll tell everyone the delay wasn't her fault?" "Yes." "And what happens to your company?" "The project continues. So you win." "Mara, everybody wins." I almost admired how easily he said it. "You still don't understand what you did." "I understand perfectly." "No, Adrian, you understand the business problem. You don't understand what you did to me." He went silent. Then he said, "I love you." A week earlier, those words could have changed my entire mood. Now, they just made me tired. "I know." He sounded surprised. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because loving me doesn't give you permission to lie to me." I ended the call. For the first time since everything started, I stopped reacting. Priya helped me organize every screenshot. Lucas sent the original presentation. Julian provided internal meeting records. Celeste forwarded emails between Adrian and Elliot. Mum wrote down exactly what Adrian told her before she signed anything. But we still had one problem. Adrian was claiming everything had been misunderstood. According to him, investors knew the property wasn't officially secured. Then Priya called me at almost midnight. "Mara, I found something." "What?" "Remember the anniversary cake?" I nearly laughed. "What about it?" "The photos you sent me." The night before our anniversary, I'd sent Priya pictures of the bakery disaster. She forwarded one back. There I was holding the cake. Mara and Andrew. "Why am I looking at this?" "Zoom in behind you." I did. Adrian's phone was sitting on the kitchen counter. The screen was lit. Celeste's notification was visible. She still doesn't know, does she? And at the top of the screen, 11:47 p.m. I stared at it. Adrian had recently told Elliot that his serious discussions with Celeste happened only after our relationship collapsed. The photograph proved otherwise, and suddenly, the stupidest cake I'd ever bought became evidence. The next morning, Julian called. "Elliot wants a meeting." "With me?" "With everyone." "When?" "Tomorrow." I knew Adrian would prepare, so I did something he didn't expect. I texted him, "You're right, we should talk first." He replied almost immediately. "Just us?" "Yes." 3 dots appeared. "Tonight." "Same restaurant." The restaurant where he proposed. I stared at the message, then typed, "Fine." Adrian arrived before me. No suit this time. No flowers, no ring. He looked exhausted. For a moment, seeing him hurt. Because underneath everything he'd done was still the person I'd loved for 4 years. "I never wanted this," he said. Neither did I. He leaned forward. I made the investor believe I was further along than I was. Finally, something close to the truth. Why? I was desperate. So you lied? Yes. And Mum? I thought she'd eventually agree. She told you she didn't want to sell. I thought you could convince her. I stared at him. And that's why you proposed? His face changed. No. Celeste said the engagement was part of your plan. I was always going to marry you? That wasn't my question? Silence. Then Adrian said, I thought once we were engaged, we'd start making decisions as a family. There it was. He still couldn't hear how terrible it sounded. You mean you thought I'd pressure my mother? I thought you'd understand what was at stake. For you. For us. There was no us in that business deal, Adrian. There was you. His frustration finally appeared. You think I'm some monster who planned this from the day we met? No. That stopped him. I think you loved me. His expression softened. And I think somewhere along the way, you decided that meant you could manipulate me. He looked down. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, when you told Elliot the Ellis property was controlled, did you have Mum's permission? Adrian looked up. No. Did you know you needed it? Yes. Then why say you had control? He leaned back. I didn't say it exactly like that. You wrote it. That presentation wasn't a legal document. That's not what I asked. His jaw tightened. Mara, did you know you didn't control the property? Yes. Then why tell investors you did? He became irritated. Because I knew you'd eventually agree. Silence. Adrian immediately realized what he'd said. I didn't react. I didn't need to. My phone was inside my handbag. Recording. His face changed. Mara, I stood. Thank you. For what? For finally telling the truth. He stood too. Were you recording me? I didn't answer. Mara. I walked away. Then he grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough. Delete it. I looked down at his hand. He immediately released me. People nearby were watching. That was Adrian's final mistake. Not grabbing me. Not even the recording. His mistake was panic, because when people panic, they stop controlling the story. And Adrian had spent months controlling every version of it. As I walked toward the exit, my phone buzzed. Celeste. I opened the message. We have another problem. Then, she sent me a photograph of an email Adrian had written less than an hour earlier. He had contacted Elliot privately, and according to the email, Adrian planned to tell everyone at tomorrow's meeting that Julian and Celeste had manipulated the entire deal without his knowledge. He was preparing to sacrifice them. Celeste sent one final message. He's going to blame all of us tomorrow. I stared back through the restaurant window. Adrian was still standing beside our table, watching me. Tomorrow wasn't going to be about saving our relationship. It wasn't even going to be about my mother's house anymore. Tomorrow somebody was going to lose everything. And Adrian had just made sure it wouldn't be me. The next morning, I walked into Elliot's office carrying the ugliest anniversary cake photo ever taken. And somehow, it was one of the most important pieces of evidence I had. Adrian was already there. So were Julian, Celeste, Elliot, 2 lawyers, and representatives from the investment company. Adrian looked at me like he hadn't expected me to actually come. Maybe he still thought I would protect him. For 4 years, I probably would have. Not anymore. Elliot started the meeting. Adrian maintains there has been a serious misunderstanding regarding the Ellis property. That's not true, I said. Adrian looked at me. Mara, let me finish. I placed everything on the table. The presentation Lucas found, the internal meeting records Julian provided, my mother's authorization, the emails from Celeste, and finally, the recording from the restaurant. Adrian's own voice filled the room. Because I knew you'd eventually agree. Nobody spoke. Adrian stared at me. Then his lawyer quietly asked him, did you represent the Ellis property as controlled before receiving authorization from the owner? Adrian tried explaining. He said, preliminary. He said, miscommunication. He said everyone understood the risks. Then Julian interrupted. No, we didn't. Adrian turned on him. You approved the presentation. I told you to remove the Ellis property. You knew we needed it. And you said Mara's family had agreed. That was when everything started collapsing. Celeste admitted she had introduced Adrian to Elliot and initially ignored warning signs because she wanted her commission. Julian admitted he should have challenged Adrian earlier. Nobody pretended to be innocent, except Adrian. Then, Elliot asked one simple question. Did Evelyn Ellis ever agree to sell? Adrian went silent. I answered, no. That was it. There was no dramatic arrest. Nobody got dragged away. Real consequences were slower than that, but they came. The investment was suspended. Cole Developments entered restructuring several months later. Julian separated himself from the company. Celeste lost her commission and faced an internal investigation at work, and Adrian eventually stepped down from his leadership position. My mother's property remained exactly where it had always been, hers. As for the proposal video, people eventually learned enough of the truth that the comments changed, but by then, I didn't care. I learned something strange during those weeks. Your reputation feels incredibly important until you realize you're trying to explain yourself to strangers who will forget your name next Tuesday. The people who mattered knew what happened. That was enough. That was 14 months later, I saw Adrian again. Of all places, it was the restaurant where he proposed. I was there for a work event. He was sitting alone near the bar. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then he smiled. Not the confident Adrian smile I remembered. Something smaller. Hi. Hi. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. Nothing dramatic. Then he asked the question I think he'd been carrying for more than a year. Do you think any of it was real? I knew what he meant. Us, the 4 years. I think most of it was. He looked surprised. I loved you, he said. I know. I really did. I know that, too. He looked down. Then why wasn't that enough? That question stayed between us for a moment, because love wasn't actually the problem. He looked at me. The problem was, you thought loving me gave you permission to decide which truths I deserved to know. Adrian didn't argue, for once. He apologized, and I believed him. I forgave him too, but forgiveness and reconciliation are completely different things. I walked away. 2 years after that horrible anniversary, Mom decided to host a little family party at her house, the same house Adrian once thought he could use to save his company. Funny enough, Mom eventually did agree to sell a small, unused section of the land, but she chose the developer. She hired her own solicitor. She negotiated her own price, and nobody made the decision for her. Priya arrived carrying a cake. She put it on the table. I opened the box. Then I burst out laughing. Across the top, in giant pink letters, it said, Happy birthday, Evelyn and Elaine. There was just one problem. There was no Elaine. Priya stared at it. You've got to be kidding me. I laughed even harder. Immediately, I thought about that anniversary cake, Mara and Andrew, the stupid bakery mistake, the photograph, Adrian's phone glowing behind me at 11:47, the message that started everything. She still doesn't know, does she? Back then, I thought discovering betrayal meant finding out someone never loved you. I know better now. Sometimes someone can love you and still lie to you. They can love you and manipulate you. They can love you and convince themselves that because their intentions aren't completely cruel, their actions aren't cruel either. And sometimes walking away isn't revenge. It's simply refusing to let somebody's love cost you your self-respect. Priya handed me the knife. What should we do about Elaine? I looked at the cake. Cut through her. So I did. And this time, when somebody got the name wrong, it didn't ruin anything. It just gave us something to laugh about, and that's the end of my story. Sometimes the hardest betrayal isn't discovering that someone never loved you. It's realizing they loved you while still choosing to lie to you. If you were Mara, would you have walked away from Adrian, or would you have given him one more chance? Let me know what you would have done. And if you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more unbelievable stories like this. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.